Okay, so we've got a good story to talk about here today. So if you've been on Twitter anywhere in the past 24 hours, you'll know that hashtag Pelosi must go was trending nationwide. Now, this is a really big deal for honestly a whole lot of different reasons. Not the least of which is that, this gives an opportunity for a lot of people out there who, maybe don't follow politics super closely or maybe kind of have a peripheral interest in politics. Maybe they're like a Democrat and they think to themselves, well, Nancy Pelosi's the Democrat, I support the Democrat, and so, they're on board with Nancy Pelosi, et cetera, et cetera. But this gives an opportunity for a lot of criticisms of Nancy Pelosi that, maybe people haven't heard before to really be aired out there, again, for the audience of people who maybe aren't super plugged in every single day. And also, it gives a great opportunity for people like Shahid Buttar to be discovered, right? Because Shahid Buttar really capitalized on this hashtag trend, as you might imagine, really posting a number of tweets that basically went viral, or you might say went viral by any standard of a political tweet. And so this is really exciting for all those reasons. And I want to defend this Twitter hashtag because there's obviously, as you might imagine, a lot of centrist Democrats came in on their horse to talk about how, this is a dangerous thing to do, that this is really corrosive to the left and that we have to focus on defeating Donald Trump. Just to give you guys one example of that kind of tweet out here, let me show you this tweet here. So this is a tweet from someone who you've probably seen running around on Twitter recently. He's had a lot of tweets out there that a lot of people have been sharing around, but this particular tweet, I don't agree with it. So let's take a look at it and then we're going to break it down. So you can see here, we the left must stop eating our own. It's both stupid and ineffective. Saying hashtag Pelosi must go when Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, Bill Barr, and so many corrupt Republicans destroy our country in the middle of a pandemic is so irresponsible. Take your purity test and shove it. First of all, I don't believe that having commitments, having specific policy platforms saying I believe in this thing, and that other thing, I don't believe that's a purity test. I think that that's just a genuine standard of saying, look, man, I believe in this thing. If you don't agree with me, then fine, but I'm not going to vote for you, right? Like, it's just having standards. It's just having basic standards. That doesn't mean that it's a purity test. So I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with having a purity test, at least how he's defining it, at least how he's describing it. And the other thing that's super obvious, when it comes to that particular tweet there is we have to point out another thing. Nancy Pelosi is not of the left. Nancy Pelosi is not a leftist. Actively supporting the 94 crime bill, not just, oh, I voted for it and let me be quiet about it. No, actively running around campaigning for it, actively running around supporting it, joking about the Green New Deal, calling it the Green Dream or whatever, insulting progressives, spitting in their face, opposing calls to defund the police in a moment when we really have an opportunity to do real and serious systematic change and systematic reform to police departments, completely changing them around. We had that political moment. We have that political moment. That moment is here. And what does Nancy Pelosi do? Run around. The first thing she does immediately comes out, we oppose this. We oppose this. We don't agree with this. That's not what the Democrats are for. Why? Because she's so interested in courting all those Republican voters that she's trying to get in from Donald Trump, the Lincoln Project Republicans, because she thinks, well, it's better to get in Republicans because that means that we're going to win more seats. That's the way to go. Nancy Pelosi is not of the left. There's nothing wrong with criticizing it, but I want to make another point here because, maybe you're watching this and you're someone who is maybe more sympathetic to this person's point of view than I might be. So let me just point this out to you guys. Even if you think, well, the number one priority is defeating Donald Trump, and I agree, Donald Trump is probably the worst president we've ever had. I mean, I don't want to go through history because you might be able to point out, a number of other people who are far, far worse out there. But, I do think that Donald Trump, we have to get out Donald Trump. We have to. Donald Trump is doing, in many respects, irreversible damage to this country. I mean, I've said, in my opinion, I do think that Mitch McConnell is worse than Donald Trump, and Bill Barr is definitely aiding in the work of Mitch McConnell and of Donald Trump. So yeah, I agree that we've got to get out Donald Trump, but I don't see how, having a challenger to Nancy Pelosi, having someone like in Shahid Buttar who, you say you agree with. I mean, this particular person here says he supports Medicare for all. Says that he said that he supports said that he supported Bernie Sanders back in the primary session, right? So, this isn't someone who's like completely has a sort of knee-jerk reaction to any kind of progressive running for office. There is no reason to think that having a challenger to Nancy Pelosi is going to reduce the likelihood of people coming out to vote against Donald Trump. That doesn't make any sense. All that ends up doing is actually just pushing Nancy Pelosi to the left a little bit more. It ends up pushing Nancy Pelosi. And who knows, Shahid Buttar does have a shot to win. If Shahid Buttar manages to pull this one off, this would be probably the biggest win for progressives that we've ever seen. I'm not joking. Even possibly bigger than AOC's win. Even bigger than AOC's win, which, as we all know, was massive, was incredible, and was incredibly huge. Because sending that message, showing that, this establishment way of doing things is not gonna fly any longer. We have to have serious reform. We have to change the way in which things happen in this country. That would show that the progressive movement is here, and it's not just here and it's gonna be on the sidelines. No, it's here and it's here to stay, and it's taking over leadership. That's what a win like that would show. But, we do also have to talk about the major structural issues involved in, why people like Nancy Pelosi, more centrist Democrats, occupy these super left-leaning seats. Because, one of the concerns that a lot of progressives bring up is, well, hold on, why is it the case that we have moderate Democrats running in, super like D plus 20 state? It's D plus 20 seats. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Shouldn't we have the moderate Democrats, if you're going to have them at all in the party, shouldn't you have them in the seats where Republicans might actually win? Have them in those seats and then save the super Democratic seats for progressives. Have progressives in those seats. After all, oftentimes, people like Nancy Pelosi, people like Chuck Schumer, the more centrist Democrats oftentimes say, well, I agree with you in principle, but in practice, it's just not pragmatic. Now, I don't agree with that, but that's what they oftentimes say. So wouldn't you think that if that's their viewpoint, if they say, well, I do agree with you in theory, as Joe Biden always says about things like Medicare for all, he just says, oh, well, I just disagree with you in practice, then shouldn't you actually try to implement a world in which the thing that you actually believe in could actually happen? So by that, you have the centrist Democrats running in the more swing seats, right? And then you have the more progressives running in the more progressives, the more socialists running in the more solidly D seats that you're not worried about losing to Republicans. But this goes to, again, a kind of structural issue here, which is that how are leadership seats oftentimes chosen? Well, first of all, they don't want to pick a seat that a Republican could end up winning, so they want to pick a seat that's very solidly Democrat, so that they're not particularly worried about it. And then, of course, the second thing is that they want to make sure that they're picking a candidate for leadership that is a little bit more moderate, so that they don't lose those swing seats, right? So they want a safe seat, but they also want someone who isn't going to make the more swing seats more vulnerable, because the Democratic Party gets oftentimes represented, as you all know, by Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the weird thing about this bizarre strategy that both Democrats and Republicans, to be clear, engage in is, of course, that it doesn't end up working, because Nancy Pelosi ends up just being the boogie woman, and Chuck Schumer the boogeyman of the entire Democratic Party, right? And so this idea that, oh, well, we're going to pick a more moderate candidate in order to make it so that, swing seats in maybe rural America aren't going to get turned off by having a progressive in leadership. I mean, it doesn't end up working anyway. Chuck Schumer is like one of the most hated people in the Democratic Party among members of the GOP. So it doesn't even make a whole lot of sense in how it's actually working. And I do think, though, it does go to a deeper point when it comes to the left and how the left engages with politics, which is that we do have to be engaged in electoral politics. We do have to be engaged in some kind of electoral reform if we want progressives to end up winning in the long run. We have to be changing the way in which elected seats are, the way in which elections occur, the way in which leadership is selected, the way in which electoral politics function in this country if we want to be successful on the left. That said, the best way to do that is to engage in grassroots movement building in order to pressure leadership to pick other leadership that is more progressive. So you have to have that balance. You have to have both electoral politics and grassroots movements, and you have to work together with them. Because oftentimes grassroots movements, you can have all the people you want protesting in the streets, but if you don't have any kind of institutions out there, fighting on your behalf, people working with members of Congress to move them on those issues and convince them that that's the safe bet for them to do, then those movements, they can march all the people you want. I mean, how many massive protests, how many massive movements have we had in the past few years under Donald Trump that, again, had tons and tons of people walking on the streets, but then absolutely nothing got done. We've had a lot of those protests recently, a lot of them. And then, of course, you just bring in the police and they just, stomp them all down, shoot them with tear gas, take them out, and then nothing ends up happening. So you have to have a situation where there's a mutual dialogue between the people on the streets, the grassroots activists, the grassroots movement, and the people in Congress and various kinds of institutions which can dialogue more directly with Congress in order to enact those kinds of change. You have to marry those two things together. We can't just think about them as diametrically opposed things. We have to work together if we want to actually get things done on the left, right? If we actually want to make progress as progressives, we actually do have to, dialogue with people and dialogue together, working with activists and working with groups together. Because look, at the end of the day, guys, if you put your hope in someone that you're voting for, if you're like, okay, well, this politician is perfect, you're going to be let down. You absolutely will be let down. There is no politician out there who's going to make you happy. There is no politician out there who's absolutely perfect. You've got to have serious efforts to push towards reform and push towards movement and make the world a better place. And of course, one of the best ways which we can do that right now is fighting for Shahid Buttar, to take out Nancy Pelosi, to change the way in which the party is structured. We've got to work together for these things. And it's not going to be easy. It's not. It really isn't going to be easy. She has so much money, so much power, so much entrenched special interest. So if I had to put money down, it's going to be a tough fight for Shahid Buttar. It just is. It just is. It's going to be a tough fight, but that doesn't mean it's not winnable. And also, the other thing that's really important to point out here, guys, is even if Shahid loses this time, it doesn't mean that he's down and out. Nancy Pelosi probably won't run for office again. Maybe she'll run one more time after this one, but most likely this is going to be her last one. Now that Shahid Buttar has that name recognition built up from this run here and is going to continue to build up the name recognition as more hashtags like hashtag Pelosi must go continue to trend on Twitter as we get closer and closer to the election, again, that name recognition is going to continue to build up. And with that, hopefully, eventually, for sure, Shahid Buttar can cash in that name recognition and win a seat in Congress, and hopefully he'll be a great progressive, a great socialist, a great democratic socialist out there fighting for true working class values as he claims to be, and as everything that we've seen so far leads us to believe that he will be. All right, you guys, that's the video. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.